folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions Committee. It is Wednesday, May 7th, and we are starting our morning meeting about 9:15. We're working with DOC on our bill H-294 that deals with the commissary and telephone usage for folks who are incarcerated. We spent time as a committee last week going through questions that we had, and we sent these questions off to DOC, and we hope to resolve, get answers to these as much as possible. Let me briefly, there's a long list. For phones, we wanted to know, are they all doing tablets, or do they actually have a phone in the common areas, a wall phone? What's the process for listing the approved individuals that the incarcerated person could connect with, and who makes that determination? This is a philosophical thing that we need to address. Do people have enough access because of the cost of making the calls? If an offender doesn't have any money in their account, how do they make phone calls? Are the calls confidential, or are they monitored? And how do you monitor, and do you allow for incoming calls? And is there any DOC cost knowing that inmates are paying? Are there limitations on the length of calls outside of what someone could afford? What's the situation in Mississippi with the phone issue? Are collect calls still being placed? Do they have to pay to call their attorney? We want that clarified. We're understanding it's free to call in, but the attorney, it's free to call in, but can the offender call the attorney without paying? What happens to their cell phone when they go through booking? And does each inmate have a tablet? Those are the questions we got for the phone. So let's start there. When we get into the commissary, we have more questions. So I'm assuming, Al, you're coming up, right? Okay. So be our guest. Welcome, Al.
Morning.
You could just identify yourself for the record.
Al Cormier, Chief of Operations with Department of Corrections.
You saw our whole list.
I've got it right here in front.
Okay, so let's
Some
start knocking them off.
scratching my notes. So start off with the access. All the incarcerated population has access to telecommunications. There are phones mounted both on the walls in the living units, and they have the access to the tablet for video calls as well. There's no limit on how much time somebody can spend when you were going through the list of questions. It's really about what they can afford. But there's no limitation on how long they can spend on the phone.
So how many, I think the best thing to do is ask questions as we go along. How many offenders or inmates, how many inmates have tablets? Do they all have tablets?
They all have access to a tablet, yes.
They have access to the tablets. So is the tablets held by security? Or
They're
they have them
issued-
in those rooms?
They're issued to the individuals that request them. So there are some folks that don't request a tablet. They don't want a tablet. But anybody that requests a tablet has access to be issued one.
So if they don't have a tablet, they can make a phone call with a wall phone that's in the common area.
Yes.
And they all have access to some means of communication to the outside, as long as they have money in their account to pay for it.
Yes, and we also allow 2 free phone calls per week for every individual.
So it doesn't matter where those 2 phone calls go.
That's not DOC policy necessarily, that's the keep contract, right? Or it's not.
Yeah, it was what we had included that in the contract.
Yeah.
How long are those phone calls that are free?
That's a good question. I do not know that answer.
10 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes,
Yeah, is there a time?
an hour a day.
Yeah, I'd have to find that one out. I'm not sure how long those free
Just
calls.
wondering.
If I had, I know the tablet. We had free video visits too. Those are 20 minutes. I would assume that the phone calls are probably 20
There's
minutes.
2 of those as well, free a month, a week. One
Video.
video for 20 minutes a week, free.
And is it one person, one device? I'm a little confused about the access to. So like if you want a tablet, you have Al's tablet, you just don't have it with you all the time, is that?
No, they're given the tablets, and they're issued the tablet, and then they have access. It's a web-based system. So there's nothing actually stored on the tablet, but if they want to access messaging, video chat, any music they may have downloaded, purchased and downloaded, movies, books, that is all available on the tablet system.
But is there at least some parameters on what they can download?
Yes,
I think that's really important.
yes.
Let people know that they don't have free
It's
access.
not free access to.
They don't have free access to the internet. They can't go everywhere that we can go on the internet, but it's very limiting. And who limits that? Is that the,
It's part of the contract with the vendor. It's their system, so anything that they're able to access is through the tablet vendor. So everything that is on there is whitelisted, what we should, so
what do you mean whitelisted?
that it's accessible. So like, there's no actual internet to go to like Facebook or to purchase something from Amazon or anything like that. It's an all-encompassing web-based system that the vendor provides. So folks can go in, click on, just like on an iPad, click an icon and get to the library section, get to their videos, or get to their games.
So it's what the contractor provides for videos and what they provide for games and what can be downloaded.
Mhm.
So they're not on the internet per se. They're not on
Correct.
the internet. It's
Not the World Wide Web. It is a closed system offered by the tablet vendor.
And let's say I I want access to a movie. Is it sort of like how we rent movies, one-time viewing?
Yes,
Once you start it, you have X number of hours to finish it.
correct.
And can you share it? Can you share your tablet with somebody else who might also want to watch the movie if that's still available?
I mean, they could certainly hand it over to somebody and say, hey, you want to finish watching this or whatever. Yeah, yeah.
So how do you determine if someone has a tablet or not?
It's at their request.
It's at their request.
And we offer that as part of the intake process. They're offered the tablet and most take them. There are a few that don't.
Yeah, I was curious about the few. I mean, I know you're not a mind reader, but they're afraid of it being broken or stolen, or they just no one to talk to, or
I probably all of the above. I mean, I don't have the answers to that, but
May not want their family to connect.
Mhm.
I mean, that would happen.
yeah. I mean, they may not have the funding to
do
purchase,
anything with it.
to do anything with it, or they're tech adverse, don't want
Me too. Well, so if you get your free video call, though, you must have a tablet to do that.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The tablet itself, is there a rental, like a use fee on that or anything? And what happens if it gets damaged?
So we would look into the circumstances that caused the damage. I mean, if somebody was acting out and threw the tablet against the wall and smashed it, we could charge them for that replacement, but if it accidentally falls and drops, and
Right.
we would send it back to the company and exchange it.
Sorry, how could you charge them? I mean, most of these folks don't have any money, right?
Right. Not saying
Notionally, then,
we-
yeah.
not saying we can collect on it. but
Right,
we
right,
can
okay.
charge.
Yep, yep.
But as a condition of a replacement?
No, well, if they wanted a replacement,
Right.
if it was at their own fault.
Yeah.
Are tablets used as currency at all in the facility?
Not real, I don't know how they would be. Um,
Well, I'm just thinking for folks that don't have access to, or don't want to have a tablet, they can use that as manipulation with a cellmate or other.
yeah, I don't think we've really seen it with that. I know issues with the phone system itself where somebody has a block number or doesn't have access to a number, say a victim, but somebody else in the facility has access. They could say, I want to call my victim,
You
use,
can make a trade for
Yeah.
something,
yeah.
make a trade for something to get that.
Yes.
What are the various means by which you can make your 2 free calls per week? Is that tablet or phone mounted or wall mounted phones or anything else?
That would be it.
That's it. Yeah.
So this leads to when a person comes into booking,
Mhm.
most folks would probably have a cell phone with them unless law enforcement kept it. How do you determine, they have to hand over the cell phone? What then happens to that cell phone? Does it stay with the other items that the person comes in with, or does it go back to a family member or someone? But how do you determine who the person can have access to, and how do you get their phone number? If they, particularly if they don't have a phone with them, because everybody keeps these numbers on their cell phone. So those are two scenarios. They come in with a phone, they come in without a phone. How do you address all that?
So, and anytime somebody would come in with a phone, we're gonna secure that phone because we don't allow any cell phones. Our staff aren't even allowed to carry cell phones.
So what do you mean by secure that phone?
We would put it in a safe. We have a safe in our booking area. So like any of their, if they come in with a credit card, a wallet, any money, it's all inventoried, accounted for, placed in an envelope and then placed in a safe. There are occasions where somebody may not know a number to call, right? Like
On their cell phone?
nobody memorizes phone numbers anymore. So we would allow access to get that number if need be.
And that would be monitored. I mean, there'd be a
Somebody
correctional
would be there.
officer overseeing this. You're not just gonna let them do this and write it down.
Correct. But then they're allowed free calls from the booking area when they come in. So they can call for bail, they can call an attorney, they can call a family member. And there's no charge for those calls. There may be a time period of 2 to 3 days before somebody gets a phone, a PIN number set up. So they would need to make a call and they're allowed to go to booking to make those calls. And then once the PIN number is issued and the approved phone list is issued, then they can make the calls from the unit.
So are they limited in terms of how many folks they would be approved?
10.
They're limited to 10 folks.
Yes.
And how do you determine those 10?
So the incarcerated individual would provide a list to their caseworker. The caseworker would go through the list, ensure that there are no identified victims on that list. Were restraining orders in effect, no contact orders, whether through a probation order or any court order. And as long as those numbers or names are cleared, then they would approve them.
So it's a caseworker that clears.
But then I thought you were also allowed an initial booking to take some numbers off of the phone. So would that happen without that caseworker checking them, like for the first few days to get a pass kind of?
Yeah, like the booking officer would find out who that person was. And oftentimes when they first are brought in, we're gonna have that court paperwork that would have those names, identify who they're
In
not.
terms of the victims.
Yeah.
Are the phone calls monitored at all?
They are.
All of them
They're-
or some of them?
Well, they're all recorded. Except for attorney calls. Attorney calls are all confidential, so those are not recorded. But all calls are recorded and then monitored as needed basis or when time allows.
People are thinking, I want to give time for folks to think.
I'm having a difficult time wrapping my head around, if there isn't Wi-Fi, how does the tablet message out?
So there's Wi-Fi installed for specifically the tablet system.
Oh.
There are wireless access points that the vendor installs. But that's that closed circuit where it only allows them to get onto that platform, that
Thank you.
web-based platform.
Is that in certain spots in the facility, or can they access it through any of the cells?
Yeah, so it's, for the most part, it's accessible throughout the facility. I mean, the tablet vendor had heat mapped where the best spots were for those wireless access points for the incarcerated population. And those are placed. I know in the past we've added additional ones where we found that there are dead spots and the tablets weren't working. So they've been really good about coming in and increasing the access.
So oversimplified, the vendor provides a tablet for free because they're gonna make enough money off of the use to be profitable. Is that a true statement?
Yes,
But you're able to monitor the messages or record the messages that are leaving or coming in, except for lawyers.
correct.
So the recording is more passive, it's not active, it's passive. So Will, did you have your hand up?
No,
No,
come back to me.
Troy, and then Brian.
Do we have data? And if not, is it available? Could we construct it that compares revenue calls versus revenue from apps? Movie, music, yada, yada.
I'm sure we could get that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would love to see that. But my guess is that that's all profit for the vendor, more so than data for how our population is using.
Yeah, so there are no commissions for the department on phone calls because of the FCC ruling.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. There
our-
used to be, right?
there used to be,
Yeah.
yeah. You know, our commissions come from the commissary side
Yeah.
of things, not with the tablets.
Yeah.
I see.
But I am curious to know, like, because this bill proposes to provide free phone calls. Personally, I'm not interested in providing free movies and music and app usage. So I would be interested in knowing what that,
I blew my mind. There goes the swimming pool too.
a reasonable man. But I am interested in, like, if we're talking about providing free phone calls, free telecom, I want to know what that does to your question, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not a fully formed question, but I think you understand what I'm looking at. Yeah,
Yeah, we can call that.
okay.
And along with that data that you said is easily accessible, to know whether it's 99% of the incarcerated using it or whether it's only 50%, I assume that would be part of the data that Troy is.
Yeah, I think we could certainly pull out, like, you know, game purchases, music purchases, movie purchases, what those numbers look like. I know, like, from phone calls, I got some data on that. Between November of 24 and January of 25, 226,000 telephone calls are made in our system.
It's holiday season too. So is that phone calls out or also including
Just
calls coming
calls
in?
out, phone calls out, yeah.
And do you happen to know, is that 50% of the population or 100%?
I don't know. I know we're, you know, you're averaging about 12,500 calls per facility per month. So break down 1,500 incarcerated individuals, 1,400.
Brian and then Joe?
We had looked earlier, as I'm sure you know, at trying to roll out proper Wi-Fi to all of the facilities,
Mhm.
and I would still really like that to happen. I assume IT guys are smart enough, it doesn't mess with this system at all, right? Okay,
No.
they're separate or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is why because the Wi-Fi that is provided for these tablets is from the company.
Right.
That is why CCV cannot provide courses over the tablet because it's not the open
Right.
Wi-Fi. Yeah.
Do you know, or can we get information as to what the average annual spend is for, telecom and commissary for inmates?
Per individual or just overall?
Let's keep it just telephone at this point.
Okay,
I don't want to, because commissary, I know where you're going, which is separate. I want people to understand the telephone
okay.
system.
So for telephone, I just was trying to, if we can get an average per head. I mean, obviously, if we get a global number, we could kind of do the math from there. What are they spending? Like, I just have no idea.
Yeah, I think we can look in the into the trust account and determine how much on average is being deposited across the system.
And I'm not against Wi-Fi, but that will be redundant in a certain setting. So what's the possibility that the vendor that's supplying the tablets now could contract with CCV and take more commission off of that and not go through the whole Wi-Fi system? I mean, it's just one more application that they would be providing, and it may actually be. I don't.
The Wi-Fi is not just to allow CCV, it is also for staff. So
Correct.
that they can enter things into the offender management system, because right now they're doing everything manually with paper.
Right. We don't want to cross those two because you got a
We don't wanna
state system and a
cross.
private system. ADS would not allow that.
Good reminder, thank you.
So do you know how many folks who are incarcerated have an account? And how many do not? Is it like 50-50 or is it 70%?
I'm gonna say it's well over 90.
That have an account.
Yes.
And how do they keep that? How do they keep money in that account?
Normally through family members, friends and family that are putting money into that trust account.
And are you seeing difference between the male population and the female population for those accounts?
We'd have to look at that. I'm not sure. I know we get a lot of phone calls out of the women's facility too, so.
Women like, they may be
I would,
kids.
yeah, I would imagine there's some parity between the
Well, I was gonna say women talk.
I know what you were gonna say. I'm gonna say something important.
You're so reticent.
Woman, I know.
What?
You're so reticent.
It would be interesting to see on the accounts if there is a difference there
Mhm.
in genders.
Yeah, I think we can look at that, yeah.
I mean, I'm surprised it would be as high as 90%. I'm surprised to hear that. I didn't anticipate that.
Yeah. The phone calls, that's their connection, so, I mean, where there's a will, there's a way, they're gonna try to get that funding so that they can, even if it's the 2 free calls a week, but, as far as an actual account, I'd say it's gotta be close to 90%.
Okay.
Does the vendor? So I'm starting to think about how Massachusetts does this. Do you know if the vendor provides a base rate? Like, we're gonna pay you this much and unlimited calls
Mhm.
on that base rate, rather than per phone call.
I don't know. Don't know, because our contract, I mean, it's a $0 contract. We're not
I know,
paying for that, so
looking to change that.
everything is based on per call right
I know, yeah.
now.
Just wondering if there's a model that we could look at, and maybe I can do some research on my own.
I know Massachusetts did away with all commissions.
Right.
And that was.
You don't know if they're paying, if the state is paying a per call basis or a base rate basis for unlimited.
I don't.
And is there a way to compare, like, I'm looking and this is an average, 12,500 calls per facility per month is what you're seeing right now. And then the testimony we received when Massachusetts went away from a contractor and had an in-house, the calls went up substantially, the number of calls. Would there be a way to compare what you're seeing now with Massachusetts? And I know it might be really difficult, but if you had an average of per inmate
Mhm.
and could compare the average number of calls per inmate in Massachusetts now with Massachusetts paying, having it in-house, is that a lot more than what we're currently seeing, or is it on track? Because
Certainly reach out to Mass and find out.
And was Mass more limited when they were contracting out? Were they more limited in number of calls? Because we can allow up to 10 people.
Mhm.
And it would really be, they have 2 free calls per week. But outside of that, if they have money in their account, they can call folks, those 10, 2 or 3 times a day, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I'd be curious to see if we could compare.
I would assume it should be easy if you compared the total number of incarcerated to those that have no funds, so they can't make phone calls. I mean, that would be an easy number to come up with.
Well, those that have no
10%.
funds are still can access 2 phone calls
No, I
a
know.
week.
But I just want to know whether, if they don't have any money in their account at all, that would be an important statistic. If everybody's got money in there, then that's a totally different.
Yeah.
view.
Yeah, we can look at that.
I'm just wondering when Massachusetts went to in-house providing, I mean, the testimony was the number of calls went sky high, right up, but I wonder if it was more limiting when they had an outside vendor compared to.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was, but we can certainly reach out to Massachusetts and find
Yes.
out.
And are there collect calls that they can still do?
No, it's just the free call that
So-
get in the booking, yeah.
Other questions? Anything else, Al, that you had on the phone? I'm looking at our questions here. And I'm assuming even though there could be up to 10 folks that would be allowed
Mhm.
inmate to call. Are there times you pull someone off of that list?
At their request, we would, if
The
somebody,
inmate's request or at the person's request?
either or, they would, if somebody says, and we allow them to add numbers too, they can swap out. The max is 10, but if somebody comes and says, hey, I need to add a different number, can I take so-and-so off? We'll do that. I think they're allowed those changes every 30 days. But then if a member of the public calls and says, hey, I don't want so-and-so to call me anymore, can you take my number off? Then we would do that too.
Do family members want to come off it sometimes?
Sometimes, because the cost is a lot, it's easier to just take their name off and instead of having to explain to the person inside why they can't put money on the books anymore.
Mhm. Mhm. I asked the question.
Hmm.
I asked the question. And I had another question and it just left. Oof. Are there times that the inmate doesn't want any family members to be on their approved list?
I'm sure there are a few.
And what about times when it comes to reentry? Because I know that there are situations at times when a person, comes up to the time for reentry. That they will say to DOC, yes, I do have a housing, I can go back to my parents. I can go back to my sister, I can go back to my brother. And there are times where the family member doesn't feel comfortable,
Right.
and they will reach out to DOC, but DOC is not at liberty to share that information with the inmate.
Right.
So how does that play out if a person's name is on the approved list for phone calls?
It gets very complicated. Because we will have, as an example, in a scenario such as that, the family doesn't want somebody to be there, but they're fearful of telling them, and then the trader person call home and say, hey, what's the status of my residence investigation? It ends up being a lot of lying back and forth. There's a lot of dishonesty and the family member not wanting to be honest. And then, it puts DOC in a very tough position when, we could absolutely approve the residence, but the family member doesn't want to do that. It gets very complicated.
I wanted to put that out on the table for people to start realizing those situations do occur. In case you ever get a phone call explaining, asking for help, something.
As we will, we'll hear from the family member saying, please don't let him come back, him or her come back. And, we want to honor that. But they're like, please don't let them know that I said that, so.
That process. Because that does happen. The other thing too that may happen is there could be some real medical situations. And an inmate could be talking to their parent and saying, I'm not getting this information, I'm not getting this, or I'm being treated this way. And then the parent would get a hold of DOC. And in order for DOC, correct me if I'm wrong here, in order for DOC to share that information with the parent or whatever, the inmate needs to assign a release of information.
Right.
And if the inmate does not sign a release of information, what happens then when a parent calls and says, hey, I keep getting the phone calls, he's saying he's not getting medication here, things aren't happening, he's losing weight, he's getting sicker and sicker. What does DOC do in that case?
Well, we would ask the individual if they would be willing to sign a release of information. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. I think sometimes it's out. They don't want the person that they're telling this to know the real story behind the condition. So again, it puts us in a tough spot where we have to basically become the negotiator between the family and the incarcerated individual, bringing medical in so that we know what the situation is. There are certainly some information that we can pass along, but if the incarcerated individual is making these allegations to a family member but won't allow us to talk to them, it's very difficult.
Right?
How often does this situation occur? 10%, 50%?
Quite frequently,
So-
very frequent.
Okay, I'm sad to hear this, but we're facilitating bad behavior. And we're paying for it.
But if they're not willing to sign a release of information, it's HIPAA. If you're not willing to sign that, and it's at a lot of levels that they have to sign this, it's not just for DOC basic information, but you also have to sign it, I'm assuming, with WellPath.
Right.
When they re-enter the community, you have to sign it if there's mental health issues that's part of their conditions. They need to sign with the designated agency to release that information to the PMP officer. The PMP officer then needs to get a release of information from that person. So there's so many layers to, in different areas that the person has to sign release of information. And I think what also happens, if they sign a form for release of information for one thing, they think it takes care of everything, and it doesn't. So there's a lot of obstacles there the whole way along. And I'm not saying this in a malicious way by any means, but there are times that folks do not want their family members to know what's going on.
You're just augmenting my argument. The fact that we're covering up for the truth of the matter within families, that's part of the problem that they have. That they're not able to address their issue with the people that theoretically should be there to help them. And we're helping them mask it. They're not better if they're not able to express their needs to the people who should be wanting to help them. So yes, I agree, it's complicated, but we, by having all the HIPAA and all this other stuff in there, are just causing a lot of pain and suffering and cost, and we're facilitating bad behavior.
What would you suggest then?
I suggest that we streamline that and get DOC out of the middle of it. And I realize that's not easy, but my point is that we are helping people conceal information that should be being shared so that they can get better.
But per federal law, that's their business unless they
Private.
decide to somebody else.
I hear you, I hear you. I'm just saying, if we have an opportunity to do something in Vermont rather than federal law, I personally think it should happen.
I don't think we do.
No.
We do.
I hear you. I feel better.
Said it.
You have to respect folks' individual rights. It's not
Because-
always comfortable.
Because the worst case scenario is they get out thinking that their siblings want them or are willing to take them in. And they confront and find out physically that they're not welcome. I've been there, folks. I had to physically remove my son and say, you are no longer welcome here. And I had to invite someone along with me to avoid a physical confrontation. So we're setting up bad scenario by following federal law.
Well, I would like my privacy to be protected. And I value that. Whenever I have healthcare or anything else, I have the right to determine who has access to my information. I think we all in this room want to have that ability. So it's no different when someone is under state custody. Unless they're deemed incompetent by the courts, then that's a little different story. And that's in a different system. It's not DOC system. That's in the Department of Mental Health and the courts. But this kind of all ties in a little bit to the telephone thing. Also, I asked some of those specific questions in case now that you're on corrections committee, you may start getting phone calls from family members or other entities asking you to help with their particular situation. You can always reach out to DOC. They may not be at liberty to explain everything either, because if the person did not sign a release of information, they can't even give us the information. But at least it gives you some information that you can balance out all sides that you're getting information from. So I purposely put that on the table for folks to be aware that there are a lot of layers to constituent work. Just in case, because I'm sure we're in a high profile committee for this particular issue. Anything else on the telephone?
I'm just wondering if there's questions. You may have had information that we didn't
Yeah.
get yet for some of the previous, the.
Yeah, I'd written down what the costs were. You were interested in what that was for the calls.
Sure.
Regular phone call, they're 6 cents per minute.
Tablets are 25 cents.
25 cents per email, text, voicemail, or photo that is sent. That's 25 cents per
email.
email, text, or photo. International calls are 6 cents per minute plus whatever international fee that gets charged. The video visitation is 16 cents per minute.
What visitation?
Video visits, 16 cents per minute,
One more time, sorry, 16.
16.
What's the difference between a video visitation and a FaceTime call?
That's what it is.
Oh, that's what that is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know if it costs more to do a video call than it does to make a phone call?
It does.
16 cents a minute
Not
per video.
Oh,
Or to cost to provide.
the actual call, yeah, that I do not. Would
Well, the email and
imagine,
text thing being the same price seems strange to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can they receive an incoming call on their tablets?
no,
They can on the wall? Can they on the wall? So it's all outgoing.
all out.
Hang on here, Will. So what if a family member wanted to contact them? How would the person know?
So if there's an emergency situation that they need to get in touch with somebody, they can call the facility.
Okay.
Facility caseworker or on-duty shift supervisor can verify the information and let the incarcerated individual know that they should call home. If they're not on their pin sheet, then we would facilitate that with a caseworker.
Well,
Mm.
my mouth is full.
No, I swallowed that real quick. I have a question about mail, because we haven't really talked about that yet.
Okay.
How does mail work? Do they pay for postage? And what's the scanning process for that like as a line of communication? I think that kind of got brought up yesterday.
So postage, every individual gets 7 free stamps a week.
Okay, that's reasonable.
Incoming mail, there's no restriction on the number of letters that they can receive. Letters that do come in are opened in front of the individual. Just to ensure that there's nothing for contraband in there. Sometimes there's $20 bills stuffed in or something, right? So you gotta look for that.
What happens with that?
That would get,
Put into their like account, but
We
they
would-
can't have the $20.
Well, you gotta scan it to make sure there's nothing on it.
Well, that's a question I had
See.
yesterday with forensics lab and
I know.
Yeah.
a little picture, some like kid drew and it had
You know,
back in the day.
Yeah.
You have that kind of situation happen
we have that situation happen every day.
every day.
Every day.
Becoming more and more prevalent.
Really?
In falsified legal mail is where we're seeing the majority of that come in. We photocopy all like coloring books, pictures that come in. Those get photocopied in color and given to the individual because we don't know what's in the crayon on the paper. But we're seeing a lot of recently where legal mail is being falsified.
Mhm.
It's easy to get an envelope or printer and create your own legal name, and that paperwork is coming in soaked in K2, spice, wasp spray is the biggest one now.
Or is that for
No, literal wasp spray, sprayed on the paper, dried, and then ingested.
That sounds like it's really.
what were the first two?
K2 and spice are it's synthetic opiates,
Okay.
and very hard to test for because the chemical makeup of those drugs changes on a regular basis.
Wow.
It's very hard to detect. So with the legal mail, we don't, because of the legal privilege, we don't, we open it, we hand it over, but to go through that is, we can't look at it, right?
How do you know, how do you deal with one that you anticipate may be falsified for the legal mail?
So we are looking very closely at all paperwork coming in now. And staff are getting better at seeing and identifying when a piece of paper looks like it. I mean, you got a piece of paper, you know, it's different, right? And so staff are paying closer attention to that. What we'll see a lot of times is with legal paperwork coming in and the metal binders that hole, after they've been hole punched, all the drugs are inside that metal binder. So we would have to literally take apart everything and again, it's privileged communication and we can't do that. So we're currently looking at technology where we can scan to have a demonstration from a company next week that scans mail to identify any tampering that may have occurred, any drugs that may be.
I assume you do like a Google search and like, this lawyer doesn't even exist.
Correct.
And what-
Or we will call the lawyer and they're like, that's not my client. I have no idea who that is.
Well, are you done?
Yeah, I just,
Try.
yeah, so you were saying falsified legal mail, so that's either
Counterfeit.
like legal help, so a lawyer or government documents, or just being falsified?
Yes, counterfeited, falsified. We've worked closely with the Defender General here in Vermont, trying to come up with solutions. So those conversations are ongoing. Because a lot of those envelopes are coming from PRO and they're not PRO clients.
PRO being
Prisoners' rights.
And
coming from prisoners' rights, but they're being falsified.
Yeah.
And prisoners' rights office is underneath Matt Valerio, Defender General. So they're manipulating even that. Okay.
do you know who's behind all that? Is it family members that are trying to get substances to their loved ones? Are these drug dealers that are just trying to?
All of the above.
Okay, okay, so it can be mixed. Yeah, but I can see how a loved one
Yeah.
wants to, you know, they're addicted, and they just keep getting it. I can see.
So the creation of our corrections investigative unit a couple of years ago, they're really digging into a lot of this and working with the Fusion Center and trying to find solutions to help stop this from coming in.
So it might be helpful, I know Troy and then Kevin, but it might be helpful, you just mentioned what we put in place a few years ago, the investigative unit.
Mhm.
And that's been up and running for a couple of years now. It might be good to take some testimony on that, the committee to understand what we're doing. So maybe Isaac, you can work with Phil and see if you have time this week, possibly. Because that's a new initiative that we put in place 3 years ago.
3 years ago, and it's been just a little over a year and a half since we've had all our staff hired and assigned into that.
It'd be good to bring the committee up to speed. Troy and then Kevin?
I'm gonna go back to the cost of paper mail, 7 free stamps per week. What is the cost of paper envelopes, things like that? One of the complaints I've heard from advocacy groups is that like an envelope is 25 cents. You know,
No, we're providing paper envelopes.
all free.
Yeah,
Is that the same down in Mississippi for folks down there?
so, yes, yeah. If they wanted more, they could purchase off commissary, for
Sure.
sure, but
Do you know how to handle, like how much do you give them?
7 envelopes.
right. But I know when I was in the facility, if somebody asked, they would hand it over. I mean, it
Okay.
wasn't a big deal. Just,
Okay.
yeah,
Probably not going through a lot of stamps every week, are you?
no.
That's,
Yes.
they're not writing a lot of letters.
They're doing email.
Right.
Legal mail to send out is free. The 7 stamps don't count
Okay.
against legal mail.
Okay.
Kevin?
Okay, that's good.
Legitimate.
Are there consequences to contraband coming in and out? To either the sender or the receiver?
Can you say that again? Sorry.
Are there consequences?
There are certainly consequences. I mean, it's putting our staff at risk for exposure. It's putting our staff at risk for dangerous and escalated behavior when somebody's under the influence. It's putting the incarcerated individuals at risk of an overdose. The consequences are very high.
Yeah, I recognize that. I'm talking about for the sender or the receiver, and the consequences to either of those.
It's hard to prove, right? Because we do not know, because it's counterfeit. We don't know that it's the actual sender. If I wanted to play a game with somebody, I could put cocaine in an envelope and send it to any individual inside. That doesn't mean they asked for it, right? So somebody receiving that information, we can't hold them accountable without knowing that they actually asked for that. So it's difficult. It's hard to track. It's hard to hold people accountable.
Be a bogus person. I mean, they could just put a name there that's not theirs. So that they're not tracked. A lot of thinking goes into this. Sean?
How do you get the drugs off the paper?
Eat it.
Eat it.
Eat
You
it.
just eat the paper.
Yeah, eat it. Just like.
And how the heck?
Someone at the forensics,
They're eating paper?
forensics lab yesterday, we saw.
Oh,
I actually had it, James.
I have not eaten
You can
paper.
also, there's other things they put in their mouths too.
Did you see that at the forensics lab?
I did, but I just didn't know how, like, I didn't know if they put it in water and it comes out in water and they drink it, or if they light it and they I don't know how the heck you do that.
Can you share a little bit of other things that they might ingest besides paper?
Well, could be any number of things.
You know, it might be good for the committee to hear some of it. Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Put you on the
I
spot.
mean, there's so it's probably as old as time itself,
Facilities.
right? And you know, people are bringing that in hollowed out shoes. They're bringing it in sewn into a hem of a coat. I mean, there's many different ways it can come inside their internal organs, right? They're either swallowing it or they're putting it in their anal cavity. Any number of ways, and that stuff, once it comes out, it's distributed and sold and traded for commissary, for protection. We've seen diversion of the MAT medication is a big one. We've seen people tie pen caps to a piece of dental floss and put it down their throat so that this saliva will capture in the pen cap, and then they can sell that later on.
Throw it back up. and
Literally,
erase it.
That's a new one,
They'll
Joe.
leave on it. Like, no joke.
Tampons in the mouth to absorb. I mean,
You name it.
yeah.
Just want to get people aware. Try.
We've heard testimony that indicated since MOUD has become more widely used mainstream, that has really cut down on the illicit drug use in the facilities. Do you think that's accurate, and is there data to?
I do think that's
inform us?
accurate.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think that's accurate. To the point where during COVID, we were finding people actually mailing bupe out to sell it. Not, yeah, so it's changed. The dynamic has changed, but we're still finding contraband coming in. But we have seen a drastic reduction in those types of introductions, illicit drug introduction.
Do you think that's appropriate?
I must have missed something.
Do you think it's appropriately correlated to the use of MOUD?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. Because they're getting what they need out of that.
Yeah.
Without the risk of, additional criminal charges to get that high from an outside source.
Kevin, what
Say
did
they
you
were-
miss?
Did you say that you have found cases where they're shipping the MOUD out to sell it?
Yeah.
COVID, during COVID,
Yes,
during COVID, but not now.
right.
Why not now?
We just had, it was, this
Because
was.
people are isolating so much back home. With COVID, everyone was isolated, but now we're back to normal. So they can,
Just easier
it's
access.
easier
So what you're
access
saying,
in
they
the
can go-
community,
They, okay, that.
where before it wasn't.
Okay.
So they were, but now what you're saying is with MOUD now in the facilities, what you're finding is a lot less contraband coming in.
Other than the illegal mail, that's,
Other than
Drug.
illegal mail.
Other than.
we're not seeing the cocaine, the heroin, the pills and so forth. It's really the soaked paper that we're seeing now.
with the different stuff, but also I'm assuming since MOUD has been within the facilities are safer security wise because you're not dealing with so much coming in from the outside.
Correct.
Is that fair to
Agree with
say?
that, yeah. I would agree with that.
So it's a security tool. MOUD is more of a security tool as well.
No, there's still some of with the diversion, strong arming and trading and so forth that happens, but I think that's more about the high from the behavior than it is the drug, right? It's like they like that, the rush of the sale and the selling and the hustle.
And the control.
Yeah.
Anything else on the mail?
No,
Anything
but I'm
else
glad
on
I,
the
glad I
phones?
opened that can of worms. Yeah, because it is the traditional form that they've communicated, so I'm surprised there's not a push to encourage that when. But a stamp is also, it's expensive and still.
They
not-
do have emails, so that.
Which is actually
25 cents.
still cheaper than a stamp.
Yeah.
It's just true.
Yeah.
But it comes out of their pocket.
Yeah.
Anything else on this before we move to commissary? So for questions that we had on the commissary was, why isn't there any competition? The flow of the commission, kickback, and who decides how it's used, like the rec fund. And in statute, we couldn't find anything about the commissary, only that it's connected to a rec fund. And what are the dollar values of the items? That's what I had for commissary. So, Al?
So the flow of the commissions, Keefe submits commissions to the department on a monthly basis based on the sales of commissary products. So it's gonna vary each month on what we get. And the commission rate is determined by what the vendor agreed to pay. I think it's 32%, I think is what we got. So that's a monthly income for the department is on that. But and again, it's gonna vary depending on what is sold and the volume of that.
I'm sorry, 32% about what?
That's the commission received on sales. So
So on all total gross sales, the department gets 32%.
and that money then goes back into the rec yard or rec
Okay.
fund, to the rec fund.
That's where we have some questions, like, so who controls a rec fund, for example? What is the money actually used for? Not in theory, but like, we wanted, I don't know if that got this far down the chain, but we want like a breakdown of where the money actually goes. And like we heard the other day, for example, that the money goes to pay for a, administrator, if you will. And so we want to get to the bottom of where that money actually goes and what it's actually used for. And if there really is council at maybe it's not called, maybe it's committee.
Yeah.
If they're actually in place and, because you hear different versions and everything.
Right.
So we want to know more about those details if we could.
Sure. The rec fund has historically supported the salaries of the rec coordinators in the facilities. Because of the reduction in the commissary, in the commissions that we've seen over the years and losing money in that rec fund, those positions are now funded through the general fund out of DOC's regular budget. What remains in the rec fund,
Just to clarify, so they're no longer at all paid for the.
No.
Okay, good.
No.
Sorry, thank you.
So what is paid for, anything in the rec yard, right? basketballs, footballs, new basketball hoops are paid for, playing cards, board games. We do tournaments, you know, if there's a poker tournament or a scat tournament or any type of card tournament, volleyball tournament. There's prizes that are purchased by the rec committee. Those prizes are handed out based on you know, what the so any, you know, I know we've purchased video game systems for the population, chairs, furniture, any number of items that goes back to benefit the population.
Obviously, each facility is different for size, but do you have an idea of what kind of money actually comes into those committees from the 32%?
I would have to look at that. I don't have that with me right now, but we can certainly get that.
That's something we're very curious about.
Yeah.
Yeah, just specifically, if we could get the gross receipts from the commissions for the last couple of years,
Mhm.
that would be useful.
Okay.
Sure.
Do we have a rec fund prior to the commissary contracts?
Yes. As long as I have been around, I know there's been a rec fund and a rec committee within the facilities.
Just follow up on Troy. How did that used to work?
That I don't know.
Try to get you.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is gonna be a statement rather than a question. I just philosophically have, and I appreciate all the requests for data that we can get here. I think that's gonna be incredibly important. I have a hard time with telling somebody you can have a basketball if you spend enough money at Keith. And that's why I asked my question. We've done this before. I think health and well-being, and I think recreation is part of that, is something we owe to, you know, an incarcerated individual.
Mhm.
That's part of rehabilitation. I think that's an obligation the state has.
Sean, are you? Yeah, Sean.
Now, what's it look, so stepping back, big picture. Does the rec fund situation work? And is there a reason it's set up that way? And do you think it's like a positive thing? Is it the best way we could do this? Like just big picture.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly worth looking at. I mean, to see, I mean, there's always a better way, right? Always built a better mousetrap. It's just, I think historically, this is what we've done and it's worked. And given the current budget constraints within the department, it's would be very difficult to try to do it another way at this time.
Because there is so little money for like, so like, just for instance, so you gotta buy a basketball. How much does a basketball cost? $50? $25?
Be $20, I don't know.
$100? Are you buying rubber ones? You buying leather ones?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, I don't know.
And then who takes care of that?
Right. Well, that's the committee, right? That's the rec committee that is, they'll put in the request to the rec coordinator that says, hey, we need 3 new basketballs, or we need, you know, a set of horseshoes or whatever.
And who makes that decision? The inmates or the rec, the guys who are in charge of this?
So the committee will vote on it oftentimes, the rec committee. And then the volunteer coordinator would purchase those items based on that.
Okay. The volunteer coordinator.
So we have a rec coordinator and a volunteer coordinator. Kind of falls in that.
There to be able to buy any of this stuff. Does it also keep the population, like the guys or the guys in there? Does it, do they care for the stuff then? Because they are kind of earning it. It is partially theirs.
Yeah, I think for the most part, that stuff is really taken care of.
Okay.
So before Kevin goes, how is a committee chosen? Like, is there like an election? Or do you guys choose them?
It's, you know, the rec coordinator would just reach out to different individuals like, hey, we've got a vacancy on the rec committee or whatever. So it's just who's ever.
By appointment.
Yeah, volunteer appointment. Yeah.
Kim? And have you already thrown out a number roughly what that annual amount is? I know the facilities are different, but just a rough order of magnitude, how much money are we talking about?
In the rec
On the
fund,
rec fund,
not even sure, do we?
We can get it for you.
Yeah,
It's
I
in
don't know.
It's in the budget material, so
Yeah,
we
it
presented
is.
it in the beginning of the section, so.
because if I understood you right at the beginning, the rec fund was paying for the coordinator, but because there's not enough rec
Right.
funds now,
Right.
general budget is paying for them, so. Right, I think.
Right, and a lot of the, I know that several years ago, we had, with Keith, we had renegotiated the commission because the prices were increasing drastically with commissary products. And the department decided to absorb that cost through the reduction in commission to leave the prices lower.
Right,
But that certainly impacted the funding coming into the rec funds.
and do you, one more, then I'll shut up. Do you think the incarcerated might be paying this premium to fund the rec?
Well, I
Or would they
don't-
rather pay lower commissary prices and,
I think we'd all rather pay lower commissary prices. I mean, anything that you and I are buying now is expensive too, right? I mean, if we go to the store and we've got a document we can share with the committee from Keith. They do, and I just got this yesterday. They do what they call a convenience store comparison.
Right.
So they'll pull their product and a comparable item in a convenience store and show the price of how comparable they are. And I mean, there's some discrepancy, but for the most part, very comparable to what you or I would spend in.
Okay.
Yeah. You know,
everybody wants to spend less, but that's not the question. The question is, do they want to be paying the premium on top of the 32%, or are they saying that's not fair to me? Why should I have to pay for
Well,
somebody
the-
else's recreation? I mean, the attitude is what I'm trying to.
Yeah, I don't, never really heard that. I mean, I haven't really heard any pushback on
Really?
on that impact, no.
Okay.
I'm seeing, Haley, see if you can back me up on this. I'm seeing 1,091,000 as a rec fund, SB section B 340
Sounds about right.
That's
That's right.
million. Yeah.
For what, the whole, all seven?
Correctional facilities recreation as passed FY 25. 91,687.
It might be the staff, like staff positions, I'm not sure.
Okay. Cause that would be a lot of commissary
Yeah,
to get to $1 million.
yeah.
Yeah, it'd be $1 million.
What was the last thing you just said, Troy?
That would be a lot of commissary to get to $1 million.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know that's the only mention of recreation I'm seeing in the budget you gave us at the end of January.
I texted our financial director and she said there's about $120,000 in the rec fund across all facilities
Per
Annual.
year?
as of this moment.
We
It fluctuates, I think, depending on the spend.
Statewide.
Can
190.
you ask her to just kind of run and see what the like an annual was?
The average?
Yeah, like an average. And so will.
Yeah. So we said 1.1 million is what's going to the rec fund.
That's not accurate.
Mhm.
190,000.
190,000.
120.
120,000 current cash balance. Okay. In all the rec.
And so what we're gonna get from them, what the average over the years.
Your balance has absolutely zero correlation to what's flowing in, nothing. It could be $5.
They could have
or
just
it
made
could
a
be
difference.
It's a meaningless number.
But it's a number too.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. So I did the Liberty myself and I got two balls right here. Sorry, two basketballs to look at side by side. You got this one, which is $16.95 and this one that's $15. So you can buy a lot of basketballs with that money. But I'm not trying to say, I heard 1.1 million at first and I was like, that's a lot of balls right there. But with $120,000, that's still quite a lot of equipment.
It's a lot, right?
Yeah.
But they're also trying to buy furniture too.
Yeah.
It sounds like, picnic tables or chairs or something the guys can sit outside on, which I get.
And so before we go down, you guys know how I feel about speculation.
Yeah.
We can't go down this road too far until we get the information. What's that?
That's it.
We hope for today.
Yes.
Phil, what is the schedule? Because I don't know if are we with them for a while?
As long as they're willing to stay.
Alright, so bringing it back down, other people have questions about this. I know everybody had concerns before and to make sure our question, Joe.
Well, it's not really quite, but just to reiterate, what I'd really love to see is, gross commissions, from a commissary for the last, say 2 fiscal years. And just to see a flow and exactly how it was spent. That's all.
Yeah.
So,
Which is,
then I think you can, that would be I think a departure point for a lot of questions or conversations.
yeah, those are the big things, I think. Did, any other questions about this?
Statement as well, but perhaps unsurprisingly, what we heard from Liv testimony last week, you probably didn't have a chance to watch it, is very different from this. That's not to say that, that was all true, but they're getting all this money from commissary. All we're getting is a couple of basketballs. It's paying salaries of the people who apparently used to, and it doesn't now. So yeah, the perception unsurprisingly is very different.
Yeah.
From Jason and Justin,
Correct, yeah.
Joshua, yeah.
And we have a letter, that letter too.
That's correct.
We did confirm the 1.16 million is for staffing costs, and it's all general fund. I'm sorry,
And
not general fund. No, I heard one staffing.
That's just staff.
For the number that Troy mentioned, that's staff.
Yeah.
For
And you're gonna get the,
salary benefits. Yeah, it's in the budget documents we prepared.
so there's really no reason, I guess, to beat it to that, but I don't know how the request came. So like, that was kind of like what we just said, like Joe had just reiterated, that's kind of what we wanted for today. So if we can get that, that would be very helpful. And, is there anything else others have to say? I mean, we have our views, but we've expressed them.
We all have. pretty-
Would you like to introduce yourself for the record,
Oh,
sir?
yes, I'm Daniel, Policy Director for DOC. I think I would just note, to Al's point, I think if there is a better way to do this, we are all ears. I would just also note that our budget development process begins in August and we submit it to the 5th floor, usually in around September. So if there's going to be a major fiscal impact to any kind of policies being put forward, it'd be helpful to know that so we can brief the higher ups. But I think if committee members would like to work with us or, put together a proposal and share it with the department, we'd be more than happy to think through some of these logistical issues, how to make this a better system, both on the commissary side, communication side, tablet side.
Well, this late in a session, there is no policy coming to your way. We're more curious to get a foundation of understanding so that we can potentially make a decision in the future, or just maybe there are decisions like, oh, it's working great, but we want to know what it actually looks like.
Yeah.
At the granular level, let's say.
And I would just offer, Al, myself, Haley, as hopefully, if there's legislation that's being put together over the course of the summer into next session, we would, we always offer ourselves as a resource. I think we would like to avoid what happened with H32, where some language was drafted that we think was maybe had to go through a lengthy review process in this committee. I think ultimately didn't yield the results folks were looking for. So to avoid that, we always.
Are you trying to put salt on wounds?
What was that?
Are you trying to salt the wounds?
Well, please just talk to us first.
I get it. We get it. Anybody else have more?
No, sir.
Go ahead, Sean.
Well, are you talking about more of this or?
Yes.
Okay.
We're not talking about general stuff.
Okay. Okay.
I have one other question. Have you considered other models to fund the rec fund? Anything else other than just saying, hey, let's put it in the general fund and lower the prices of the commissary? Have you actually thought about that?
We really haven't because of the costs. I mean, for us to try to operate it privately, and I don't know if that's where you're going.
No, I'm not saying you supply the commissary. I'm just saying forget the premium and the general fund covers the cost of the recreation. Have you considered that? To manage all of that commission.
Right.
Even if you have a computer system, it's a lot of paperwork.
Mhm.
And maybe the incarcerated don't really want to pay the premium because they don't play basketball. I don't know.
I think if we were to replace it with general fund dollars to fund the rec program, whatever that amount may be, there is an incredible strain on our general fund budget. Our staffing costs are astronomical, as you've heard in this committee time and time again. I will say that we make up 50% of all overtime costs for the state. I think it's like 25 million this year that we're looking at in terms of deficits. So there is a lot of pressure on the department to find ways to reduce our impact on general fund spend.
Did you
Just in
say,
general, as context.
I do understand that.
Troy's next, and Mary, did you say you have a question?
awesome.
Okay, so Troy first, then Mary, then Sean.
Is there any current statute that prevents, and I'm not saying you're gonna be jazzed about this, but is there anything in statute that prevents you from doing a state-run commissary?
No.
Fair competition club, anything like that, like going to Costco, going to,
Well, the bulletin 3.5, there are certain state procurement rules which may limit us.
can you summarize that in like maybe two?
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT is quick.
Yeah, so bulletin 3.5 from BGS really dictates how and what we can spend from a procurement side of things contractually. So that would be difficult, but
Mary?
You had just, Isaac, you had just put out a figure for 20-some million. What does that encompass?
I'd have to run that by Kristen, but I think that's just what we're looking at in terms of overtime, are the pressure on staffing above what's been budgeted. Because of the vacancies. Having to mandate overtime.
So 20 million over budget to cover overtime. Yeah, okay. You had a question?
Yeah, and Isaac, so that's because people are not working 40-hour weeks.
No.
What's average that people are working? Like, are people working 60s or 50s or 45s or 42s?
More than 42.
yeah, I would say 50 to 60 is,
In there.
yeah.
Especially correctional officers. That was one of the first things we heard.
Yeah, I know, I remember.
Close to 25% staff they need.
And you're looking for people, you're constantly hiring people. But are you also constantly losing people?
Yeah, the recruitment efforts are great. We have no problem recruiting. It's the retention.
Yeah.
Retention.
And you spoke to that.
It's-
You guys spoke to that with us.
Okay. No, it's a bigger issue for, not today, but it is a bigger issue. Anything else you guys have?
Well,
Go ahead. Might as well say whatever you're gonna say.
no, I mean, were we gonna talk to these guys about what the thing we did on Friday?
What did you
So, can you write it down?
Reentry simulator.
Oh, we have reentry. That's right. We're supposed to have a reentry. Thank you.
Well, I didn't know if you were, and if they have time to chat with us about it in the room,
Do you
it would
have-
be helpful.
Do you have time?
Or do they have to go? I mean, even like, yeah,
Yeah,
Well, let's give them a
Can
second.
we say we had time tomorrow?
Well, Alice wants to talk about the reentry today. I know that, but
the simulation there.
yeah, I'm good.
you're good?
Yeah.
So obviously, we came down to visit you guys on Friday. It was an interesting experience, I suppose. I had a nice conversation with the gentleman who was from the Navy. And his story for me was, he was talking about getting out. Did I tell you this yesterday? One of you I told this to maybe. So anyway, the guy got out of the Navy and, he was used to being in charge of millions of dollars and you come back home and you're nobody. And I told him how relatable that was. In the military, I was in charge of tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars, dozens and hundreds of troops. You come home, you're nobody. And I told him, I said, well, it's nothing like getting out of prison. And he said, but you'd be surprised how closely it is related. So it's an interesting story, but people want to share what they experienced. And then we don't hear from your board who just started reentry. But
Did you process yesterday yet? No,
We did not.
just reentry.
Yeah, reentry. So what do people have for observations about reentry? Other than, go ahead, Sean.
Well, I want to ask, obviously it was super effective. It was something that was, I think all of us learned a lot. But I guess my question is, is it that much of a cluster when someone gets out of jail? I thought we were doing a little bit better than that. But it seemed like it was, not having anything, like not having your birth certificate, social security number, driver's license, all of us know. I mean, I don't know if anyone else had that. I didn't. Is that everyone's experience?
I think it's hard to prescribe one set experience in everyone who enters their communities, but the simulation didn't mimic situations that people can and often do encounter. Prison, not to say that that's the experience of everyone, but probably some combination of all of the challenges that our participants did experience.
So being a person who wants to solve problems,
You're in the wrong business.
I'm not kidding.
You and me, Slaney.
I'm not gonna stop.
You and me, Slaney.
I will, right. Is that
Let's get ourselves back.
why, let me ask you this, like, is there a way we can help you? I'm just talking about that stuff. Is there a way we can help you help incarcerated people get those things, just those 3 things before they go out of the prison? They're sitting there all day long. Are we doing what we can as legislators? Can we, like, by the time you're done after 10 years, we make sure that you have a social security number, a working, driver's license, and your birth certificate?
You're not gonna have a driver's license.
Well-
You will have an ID.
That's, you're getting into specifics. I mean, but can we get, is that something we need to legislate? Is
We're
it,
already doing it.
you are?
We spent quite a bit of time in testimony last year on the identification system. We've got an MOU with DMV. So we have a process set up for getting individuals their non-driver ID, even birth certificate, social security card, when they do release from prison.
So everybody coming out of,
It's not everybody.
Not everybody.
so it's not the
Not
detainees.
detainees.
right?
It have to be there longer than 6 months, right?
It takes time to process with DMV to get those IDs to.
How can we make that faster?
It's DMV working with the feds because they're connected with the real ID. And you cannot, a lot of these folks, you cannot give them a driver's license because their driver's license has been suspended years and years and years ago.
Okay.
So you can get them a non-driver's license ID. They could also go towards a driver's license if they want, but they would have to pay for it. The non-driver ID that they can have is paid for through DOC. And we work to streamline that with DMV, because DMV's in the driver's seat with that, because they have to comply with federal regulations for that.
Yep.
So incarcerated people are getting that.
It's a much better process than it has been. There are still kinks, and we work through those. Sentenced individuals done very well. Detainees,
Not so good.
more difficult because we don't know when they're getting out. We don't know that they're coming in. They could be there 30 days, 60 days, and all of a sudden they're released by the judge and we don't know that they're leaving. And out the door they go, and
You can't get an ID overnight.
I get that, but why can't can't that be part of their incarcerate, like when they land? You got an ID? No. Okay, fill out this form and we'll get it going. It might take you 3 months or 6 months before you get it. We may have to find you wherever you are after, but like.
the number of detainees that we see in and out of our system on a daily basis, we would never be able to keep up with that. And once they're out, we don't have any, we don't follow them, right? They're not
Okay.
on supervision at that point. So
Representative, to your question, if I may, you asked earlier, is there something that we can do? And I think that, I don't know if this is legislative, but you heard Q, the facilitator, talked about being part of the Reentry Coalition of Philadelphia. And that's something I talked to Working Fields about, just great work across the state, is that we don't have a Reentry Coalition. We have wonderful community partners doing great work in our facilities, out in the community, but there's not always a whole lot of coordination between those partners. And so I think that there is a lot of opportunity
for those partners and for DOC to come together like they have in Philadelphia and other jurisdictions to think about how do we build a more efficient system that maybe DOC isn't the one getting folks IDs post-release, but maybe there is a community organization that can do that.
So Troy, Mary, Brian.
I will just remind the committee of testimony we have heard, and this is not a criticism of DOC at all. I know I have experienced you all to be invaluable partners as we try to fix these solutions since I've been here, including last year, as we tried to tweak the ID stuff. We do have a problem to fix with the detainees. Some of the testimony we heard is, and this is from recently released folks, we know we're going to be released, right? Because we're represented by a public defender who is in coordination with the state's attorneys. We know that we're leaving the facility, we're going to go to a judge, and the judge is going to say time served. And I don't disbelieve that. So, and I was heartbroken by the loophole that was explained to us about a policy that we just finished up at the end of last session. This was Josh, very recently released person who said, I was still in my prison uniform. I had a bag full of letters. I had no money. I didn't know where I was going to go. It does not surprise me that he reverted to behaviors that helped him survive in the past. And that included relapse. And he had been a detainee for, I think, 4 months. So even if we, and the legislation from last year didn't take effect until a month or two after he was released. So he was a month shy of the effective date of that legislation. And he had only been a detainee for 4 months, if I remember right. So he wouldn't have been captured by that 6 month. So we do have continued problems to figure out. And this is why I asked if you remember, as we were talking, H32, do we need criteria on that language that says may provide for detainees? I don't know what that criteria is, but I do think it remains a question for me and a concern for me that somebody who has been with us for 4 months might require more assistance than we are legislatively required. No. A 3-day stay? No. Is it a 2-month stay? I don't know. Is it 3 months? I don't know. But to hear the story of how the policies we're creating very recently created a very specific loophole that I don't think is probably uncommon was hard to hear. So we have to fix the detainee. We have to figure that out. I'm thankful to have you as partners, and I know you're committed to doing that. I just want to identify it as a problem that remains.
It's a problem not unique to Vermont. When you look at correctional policy nationwide, where you often see in the media the biggest headlines where things go wrong, it's in the jail environment.
Yeah.
Jails across the United States face significant challenges more than this.
Which is detainees.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
You don't have jurisdiction.
Well, for all of those issues.
Right.
Short-term
You don't know
stays,
when they're coming out.
folks are dysregulated, unknown release dates.
You don't have much history with them. You do have history with folks who have been there for 3 or 4 years. You do have history of. Mary, Brian, and Kevin.
Well, what has been hard is for the last number of years, several years, we have heard how our reentry is getting better and better. And so I'm not trying to be setting you up for anything, but that's concerning. I'd rather hear the good, bad, and ugly so that we can fix these issues or try to make them as good as they can be. I had a very different impression as to how this rolled out for someone. And just seeing, I mean, how many of you in this room had a good experience on Friday?
painful.
It was painful.
Yeah.
And if that's the norm, oh my God, what are we doing? But Al, you had said there were glitches that we were doing better, but there are still glitches. What are you seeing as those glitches?
But for the earlier discussion, the detainee population is tough. Like to Isaac's point, the lack of a reentry coalition, we've got great partners, but there's no collaboration amongst all of those partners to build a good program, reentry program. Where we are getting better is in that sentence population and preparing them for reentry and understanding, we're working with reentry POs in each of our field sites. That's their main focus, is ensuring that the individuals that we know are getting out are getting those wraparound services set up ahead of time. I think we'll see some improvement with the 1115 waiver when that comes through. We're starting to stand up reentry caseworkers in the facilities so that those reentry POs and those reentry caseworkers are working together to ensure that collaboration. So there are things that are happening, and yeah, that was very uncomfortable on Friday. And to Haley's point, everybody's a little bit different. Some people get out with all kinds of support, others don't, and we can't always control that component of it. But the detainee population is a tough one.
Brian, and then Kevin?
I thought Friday was awesome. I really thought it was going to be, and forgive me for being cynical, sort of putting lipstick on a pig, and everything's going fine. And so to get there and to see what a disaster it was kind of refreshing in its way. I mean, it sucked. Yeah. I was hot, I was hungry, I couldn't do anything. And so for a long time, I'm thinking about my experience and, to whatever degree that relates to an actual person being released and their experience. But then the more I was there, the more I thought about the people who are trying to provide these services. Some may actually want to help and have it beaten out of them. Some want to give assistance and have no idea how to do so. And people started talking about siloization during the conversation at the end. And I remember one person was saying, there's no way in hell you can get somebody a birth certificate that fast. And somebody in the back is like, you just Google it and you do it in 5 days. And so to have that information out there and not being conveyed, this goes back to Isaac's point. I mean, that's what we need, is that sort of network. And you're right, like a reentry network. And I wonder if these, caseworkers that you just mentioned starting up in the facilities couldn't be a part of that. I don't know how we set it up.
Yeah.
But that seems like it would fix a lot of this potentially without a whole ton of money if you just get the right people together. Anyways, thanks. I thought it was super good.
I'm getting back to Sweeney because I like to see problem solved, not just Band-Aid. I'd like to know what it would cost, and I know this is a difficult thing to come up with. Every detainee that comes in, if they don't have those basic forms of ID or whatever they need to start that process, whether they're 2 days or 5 days, doesn't matter. When they get out, if they don't have it, we're just setting them up for failure. And if we really are trying to help them, why wouldn't we begin that right at the beginning? And if you don't have an address to send it to, we really have a problem. So I would like to understand what that cost would be. The other thing, just for fun, this is fun, okay? The attitudes that were portrayed in the simulation were like the old DMV. I don't want to go to the DMV because they're just a pain in the rear end. They don't want to help. They just like to see me stand in line and then tell me I don't have what I need, which they did it for fun, I believe. But if it was for the lack of integration, we can do better than that.
Yeah.
So Al, when someone comes in to a facility booking, detainee, or even someone who's going to do a sentence, what type of ID do they have on them?
Some may not have any. And I think to your earlier point about somebody's lost their license, right? They don't have a valid license. A lot of people just throw it away because they don't have it. They're like, what do I need this for? A lot of times they'll be arrested. The local law enforcement, we had this conversation last week around local law enforcement taking the person's property, right, with the incapacitated folks. So it's often the same with the arrestees that are coming in as well. The local law enforcement agency will take their wallet, their phone, their ID, throw it in their storage locker, and then they come to us with nothing.
Do folks know their social security number? Do they know?
Some don't.
About where they were born?
Some do, some don't.
It's part of the issue to go back and get a birth certificate. They don't know where they were born.
You can't. But if you don't try, we're just turning the crank.
But sometimes when they're coming in and bookings, when you get that information.
Right, right.
If you don't have it, then whose responsibility is it to get? Is it the,
Well, oftentimes we won't get all that information when they come in. And that's where the caseworker comes in to, when they do the booking process after the intake and orientation. They'll start digging into that, they'll try to find out where they went to school, eventually reach out to a school district where they may have been to get more information. So they'll do their due diligence and try to finding that information, but it doesn't always pan out.
there's some,
So, totally echoing Brian's, everything he said, big quotes around it. And I really I was impressed that Isaac got up there and said that he was willing to take like pretty big hit there, that he does some things right and he does a lot of things not right. And I kind of felt like that was pretty amazing to hear. That kind of blew me away. But I guess, but getting down, I'm going to run down into the minutia a little bit. Is there any way we can like keep whatever IDs these people have and the cops don't keep them? Is there's like anything that we could be like, why the heck do they need their ID in Brattleboro when they're up at Northwest facility? They may not get back to there for years. Like, why doesn't that follow them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's certainly a question for law enforcement.
question for law enforcement.
And
Okay.
with the multiple law enforcement agencies we have, they're all probably having different procedures.
Local police department.
Yeah, but that seems to me that then we should change that. And
change that.
it should be like, you can keep everything, but give the person a plastic bag with their, whatever they got. Any ID should follow the person wherever they go.
Well, you don't give them the plastic bag. Whoever's transporting them is responsible for
Yeah,
that bag.
okay,
And they hand off
yeah.
the person and they hand off the bag.
So
Right.
if people are interested, we could take some testimony from law enforcement to really
Yes.
figure out what the process is.
Mhm.
So I'm not quite sure. I mean, state police will probably have a different process than municipal.
Fine.
And the municipal may be keeping it for other reasons.
And sheriff's could be different.
And we're limited with storage. I mean, I know it's an ID, but when it comes to
I get it. Yeah.
higher amounts of property, it's hard for us too. We're very limited in what we have available for storage space.
That's what comes to you, but people think you have control of all of it,
And then we're liable, right?
and then you're liable. So,
When does the Timex become a Rolex? When it's not documented by a correctional officer.
Right.
So like,
Yeah.
right,
I got you.
yeah.
James and then Kevin.
Well, I just wanted to bring everybody back down a little bit and remember that Friday is not to show you that it never works. That's not the point. The Friday, any of these simulations, and to Brian's point, it's nice to see that it was a more like honest depiction, is to show you that it can at times and maybe oftentimes not work. It's not that it never works, so that nothing ever goes right. It's showing you intentionally the situations where it doesn't, so you can get some level of understanding of people's frustration. But like, it's not that nobody ever gets out. I mean, it's not right. And I'm not making it like light of that, because if 10% of your people get out and things are wrong, it's still too many. But like, don't dig down to the like, well, it just all sucks, never works. That's not what was being depicted. It's showing you the quote unquote worst case scenario that probably is far too common, but it isn't everybody. And we need to fix it. But my point is like, don't be like, oh man, nothing's working. It can work. It's just they're showing you the worst parts. So,
But if it is far too common and it's mainly because we don't attack it for detainees, then we, in my opinion, should attack it because we're just setting them up for failure as when they're released. So if we really are trying to rehabilitate, we need to at least try to get documentation they need. And if they don't want to tell us where they are born, that needs to go in a file because somebody needs to know that anyway. I mean, if they're not cooperating to try to be rehabilitated, that should be on the record too.
They may not know.
And Representative, you're welcome to come to Northwest Booking on a Friday night and get a sense of what that looks like.
I hear you. They may not
I'll
know
do it
where
with
they
you.
were born.
See all kinds of things.
Sure.
A little off topic, but I'm gonna ask just general question. Do prisoners get counseling in prison?
Depends what you're talking about.
Incarcerated prisoners?
Depends who, it depends.
Counseling is a very broad term.
Are there licensed psychologists and counselors licensed who work with people on a weekly basis to help them get better and work through their trauma?
You have,
Everybody.
no,
Not everybody.
no.
What's the percentage?
Depends what counseling you're, for example, Sex Scott came in, you know, you talk about sex offender treatment, intensive counseling services that are offered for folks who are mandated by the court. Have that programming, there's MAT counseling that goes along with the medication.
SFI.
Yes.
Seriously functionally impaired.
LPAP does have a mental health division that is in our facility, so there are licensed clinicians that do offer one-on-one with population, but some may not want to engage. A lot of them don't want to engage, but I was exploring like the IPV, intimate partner violence, is a big one. The sex offender treatment is a big one. You know, as we start to stand up more and more of the vocational training, that's going to be like life skills kind of stuff. So it's happening. It's just not a broad counseling for everybody in an environment right now.
But it is prior to the final 18 months before they're released, because that's what I was hearing.
Depends what their programming requirements are. That may be
Depends
a
on
little
the risk,
different.
charges.
A sex, being convicted of a sex offense, oftentimes you will have mandated sex offender treatment programming.
Right away.
Which you must complete.
Right.
And you can opt not to complete it, but then you will max out.
I just think that that's really important for all the, if we're really trying to get people better. And if they're not getting weekly counseling, I mean, I went through counseling to help save my marriage once. It worked really well. It's like it, and I'm not in prison. I really feel like it's something that something that I'm going to kind of not let go of.
We do have the peer support, the open ears coaching, which is peer to peer. Not really counseling, but it's somebody to listen to, somebody to talk to. So we just graduated a class of new open ears coaches in Newport last week before. So that's another program where the incarcerated population has that ability to talk one-on-one with somebody.
With each other. Okay, that's great. That's wonderful.
In any therapy or counseling, the people have to be willing to participate and put the effort in it. And that's the key. You can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
But we do document that. Yes.
Yes.
But, you know, we can take more testimony in terms of there's a variety of things I'm thinking of, what medical services are being provided, of which counseling, therapeutic counseling is part of. I think it might also be good to talk about the SFI population. We haven't gotten into that one. Seriously functionally impaired, which is folks with severe mental health or learning disabilities issues. We've done a lot of work in this committee on that. Supposedly, we have an MOU between Department of Corrections and Department of Mental Health in terms of services to be provided to folks who are incarcerated with mental health issues, because DOC is picking up a lot of that now. And they were not designed as mental health. It's a department to provide mental health services. It's not what they were designed for. But we're putting folks with severe mental health issues into an incarcerated setting that is based on security, not therapeutic. That's the real difference here. Not to say that therapeutic shouldn't be involved, shouldn't be part of it, but that has not been the goal of DOC. but with the whole national deinstitutionalization and the thinking that the money was going to go into the community to beef up the programs there to provide services to folks in the community rather than being institutionalized. They're still being institutionalized, only in the wrong setting. They're being institutionalized in DOC, and that's what DOC is not designed for. So we can take some testimony to really hear how, what your mental health population is, what services are. When you talk about coordination of our partners out in the community, that was the biggest thing that the Council of State Governments found with our Justice Reinvestment 2. Our community partners in the community are not coming up to the plate when a person is reentering from corrections. Everybody expects corrections to pay for that and provide transitional housing, provide employment, provide mental health services, provide healthcare services. Nobody wants to touch a person who's been incarcerated in our partners in the community. That was the big thing that the Council of State Governments found and said, we have got to coordinate our partners in the community to come together to help folks who are reentering from DOC, because everybody looks to DOC to provide those services, and that's not what they're good at.
When you say our partners, what do you mean by that?
Designated agencies for mental health. Pathways is a great partner, but there needs to be more in transitional housing. Employment arena, Department of Labor, to really help employ the folks or help them with training, our educational system, the whole network that's out there to help folks. In order for a person to re-enter and to be successful, it's a three-legged stool. They need treatment in whatever it may be, housing, and stable employment. If you have those three, you can succeed. And if one you don't have, the other two are at risk. You end up back in corrections, but everybody looks to corrections to provide those services. So, you know, that reentry coordination was great. Great thing. One thing, and this, and Al, I think you're gonna remember this, you and I are the only two left. I don't know if Mary might, but I don't think you were in the committee at the time. Patrick Flood.
I remember Patrick.
And he was secretary, I think.
HS secretary.
And we were dealing with a lot of folks with mental health issues coming out of corrections. Nobody wanted to deal with them. So Patrick put together an intra-agency team, intra-departmental team, because the Agency of Human Services has the Department of Mental Health, DCF, Economic Services, Department of Health. So when a person with severe mental health issues was due to re-enter the community, he would get a team of folks from each one of those departments, because I'll be done in a minute, Wendy. Come on in. He would get a group of folks together from each one of those departments, because chances are the person had mental health issues. Chances are there was some health issues. Chances are there might be a child involved. And he had an interdepartmental team that wrapped services around this person's reentry to get folks in the community. That was really successful. But once Patrick moved on, fell apart. So we're not talking about anything different now in terms of how can you coordinate. Anything else on the reentry? Anything else?
It's very well done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So let's take a quick break. Let's take a 15-minute break. 10, 15 minutes. Folks have been here since 9 o'clock.
Yep.
And then when we come back, we will reprocess field